The reason you clicked on this video is probably because you feel tired, lazy, and just exhausted overall. You want the grades, but you don't want to put in the hard work to achieve them. So, how do we solve that? The reason you feel like that can be because of a lot of different factors, brain fog, procrastination, and a lot more. But at the end, it comes down to your high levels of craving dopamine. If you're new to this channel, my name is Ayan, and I started this channel 6 months ago to help students like me improve their grades by leveling up their productivity and using better study techniques. So if you're into that, drop a sub and let's move back to the video. Dopamine is one of the 4 feel-good hormones. To better understand it, here's a clip from TJ Power, a neuroscientist on Ali Abdal's podcast, explaining what dopamine is and how it exactly works.
Effectively, this chemical enables you to have motivation, and we all need motivation in our lives, whether it's with our partners, our jobs, to exercise, to bother to cook healthy food. Motivation is like the core of being a human being, and all of these things that overstimulate this chemical and then crash the chemical out lead to dopamine not functioning very well anymore. And so many people in the modern world are just struggling to take action towards what they're seeking for. They're struggling. They have dreams in their mind with their careers, or, I really want to be healthy, and they get a little bit motivated for a second and then it crashes. And society really needs to understand that operating and getting this chemical into balance is what's going to enable you to actually get focused and stay consistently motivated.
Essentially, we've destroyed our dopamine system. Let's take this as an example. When you wake up in the morning, you can either go ahead and brush your teeth immediately, or you can go and grab your phone and start scrolling on social media right away. Your brain builds up dopamine overnight, and since dopamine is responsible behind your motivation, when you go on your phone first thing in the morning, you're using up that dopamine. And because let's take TikTok, it's such a high dopamine activity, you suddenly cannot be bothered to do stuff for the rest of the day because you've already used up your dopamine and hence have no motivation left inside of you. Procrastination also happens for this exact same reason, because of low dopamine levels. You sit down to study, and at the start it's so boring that you just don't want to do it, but 5 minutes later you start to build up momentum and you start to actually enjoy it. You enter something called a flow state. Because of that, it becomes slightly fun, and by the time you finish studying, you're going to look back and say, wow, I actually studied for once. The start is always the hardest because your dopamine levels are kind of on baseline, and the start is also one of the reasons a lot of people end up giving up so early. They look at a question and say, man, I'll do it later. The reason is because your dopamine levels are baseline, and since dopamine is behind your motivation, when you barely have any dopamine as it's on baseline, you basically don't have any motivation. But when as I said, the start is the hardest, but when you actually start studying, you build up dopamine and you become more motivated, and because of that you start to gain momentum and it actually becomes slightly enjoyable for you. Another thing is that if we watch TikTok, reels or shorts or whatever it may be before we actually start studying, our dopamine levels will actually be in a deficit compared to baseline if we didn't do anything. And that's why it is so hard for us to go back to studying when we start scrolling on Instagram or something, because scrolling on Instagram, watching TikTok is a high dopamine activity, but studying is not. So when you sit down to study, your brain will be craving dopamine, and studying will not give you that. So your other alternative will be, let me go ahead and pick up my phone and start scrolling naturally. So that's why never ever decide to do a very high rewarding dopamine activity before you go to study, because it will just ruin your entire study session. And even if you do end up scrolling and then going back to studying, the first 15 minutes will be the hardest thing for you, because in the first 15 minutes your brain will constantly be telling you to go ahead and pick that phone up, because you will receive more dopamine from that and you're not receiving it from studying. So you're gonna have to have self-control, and you're gonna have to fight the urge to basically study. And after 15 minutes you're gonna gain momentum and your dopamine levels will go above baseline, and then you'll start getting momentum and getting motivated. So just bear the pain for the first 15 minutes and then you should be fine after that. Do you ever wonder why you feel kind of shit after you scroll Instagram reels or watch TikTok? There's a literal scientific reason behind that. When you watch TikTok or reels or whatever it may be, your brain receives high levels of dopamine instantly. So there's an immediate jump from baseline to a lot, like very high in dopamine levels, and your brain just gets confused on what the hell just happened. So it ends up spiking and then crashing out immediately. The crash is actually the reason you feel so bad that I just wasted a lot of time. Dopamine is a curve that's meant to go like this, but when you watch TikTok it goes like this and comes crashing down, which is what impacts your mood a lot, and be like, why do I feel so bad? It's because you just bombarded your brain with a lot of dopamine instantly, and you just ended up feeling bad after that when it crashed out. The reason a lot of us are struggling to take actions towards our own goals is because we constantly keep crashing the system that is responsible to getting us there. But now that we have that out of the way, how do we exactly fix this? I've made a list based on scientific evidences and my own experiences on how you can fix your dopamine levels and how you can actually become more productive using dopamine to your advantage. So here are 3 of the most important tips that you can apply to yourself to make sure that you do not procrastinate or burn out again. Tip number 1, and the most important thing that you can do, is spend time away from your phone. Probably one of the most important things that you can do is spend time away from your phone, especially in the morning. As I said before, dopamine is basically responsible for your motivation, and if you're crushing it first thing in the morning by using your phone, then that's basically setting yourself up for failure for the rest of the day. So no matter what you do not pick your phone up first thing in the morning. It is not worth ruining your entire day because of one single action. So as soon as you wake up, go ahead and splash cold water on your face. Then you can make your bed, brush your teeth, whatever you want to do. Just do not touch your phone for the first 30 minutes of the day. And 30 minutes is just a minimum. You can, if you want to really see the impact, you can go to an hour, 1.5 hours, even 2 hours. If there's something really important, you can just go ahead and check it on your computer, but do not pick up your phone. Another reason because of that is every time you pick up your phone, your brain subconsciously thinks that, you're going to open Instagram, TikTok, or whatever. So it's going to start releasing dopamine anyway, even if you do not open the app. So it's better if you use your computer or something else to check important stuff. And then in the evenings, try to spend 60 minutes away from your phone at least. This will help reset your dopamine levels as well. So just to summarize, try spending as much time away from your phone as you can, because it will be better for you in the long term. Now, tip number 2 is getting into a flow state. Whenever we enter flow state, our brain generates a lot of dopamine, like a lot of it, because it thinks that we need a lot of motivation to get the task done that we're actually doing. So essentially it helps us become more focused. A flow state is basically when you're hyper focused on doing a single task for a prolonged period of time. It's much easier to achieve it when you're doing something that you enjoy, but it's also slightly challenging. That's why in my previous videos I also mentioned that you should not try to hate the subject, but even if you do dislike the subject, you should try to like it, because when you like something, you're more likely to become hyper focused on doing that single thing. Think to yourself, why do you find it easier to focus on one subject but not the other? It's because it's easier to focus on stuff that we find interesting. So the next time you're doing something that you do not like, at least try to enjoy it, just so you can build up that flow state. And last but not least, creating a schedule. I'm not sure if this is scientifically proven, but it works for me, so I'm just gonna base it off my own experience and explain it to you as well. Whenever I end up making a to-do list or a calendar for the next day, I almost 100% of the time end up achieving whatever I wrote on my to-do list for the next day. And I don't know how it works, it just works, right? So it is better to create a to-do list and then a calendar rather than not, because for me at least, I've ended up achieving almost every single thing that I've written on the to-do list, whereas when I do not write it, I usually do not end up achieving whatever I wrote. I think in my subconscious, I just knew that, at this time I'm meant to be doing this. So I just end up doing that and I end up achieving it by the deadline as well. So there's no harm in, giving it a try. So I do recommend you give it a shot and let me know how it goes. Having a good morning and night routine helps a lot, especially when you do not pick up your phone first thing in the morning and use it last thing in the night. There's a reason we feel good when we study or read for 20 minutes as opposed to, scrolling on Insta for 20 minutes. Our brains were never designed to receive such high doses of dopamine, instantly. In the past, we always used to work for long periods of time just to receive that dopamine, and nowadays we can just open our phones and receive it immediately. So that's messing up with our system. As I just said, people in the past used to work for hours and hours on end just to build a shelter, and then when they would finally finish that, they would feel a sense of accomplishment. And nowadays we just pick up our phone and receive the same level of dopamine that they would receive, but we do not feel that sense of accomplishment because we've not done anything to earn it, and our brain's thinking that we've done it, but we know that I didn't do anything. All I did was open Instagram and I received the dopamine. So that is what actually ends up making us depressed as well. The same levels of dopamine that they received for working hours and hours, we can receive in just a mere amount of seconds, which is extremely dangerous for us and a big reason why we as a society are so demotivated to do anything, which is why you see a lot of lazy people, you see a lot of people who just cannot be bothered doing anything. All they want to do is sit in bed and scroll social media because their brain is getting tricked into receiving such high doses of dopamine, and they do not want to do something that's boring but will reward them at the end. They would rather have the reward instantly by scrolling on social media. So that is a big reason we are so lazy, procrastinating, and all of that stuff. This video is highly inspired by Ali Abdal's podcast with TJ Power, and it is linked below. The video itself dives into a lot more detail about the 4 feel-good hormones, including dopamine, so make sure you go ahead and check it out. The link is in the description. If you like this video, please go ahead and leave a like right now. You can also go ahead and subscribe to the channel right over here, and you can go ahead and check this video out on the secret to A-level chemistry right over here. Thank you for watching today's video. I will see you very, very soon. Take care and goodbye.